Today we have a very interesting guest, and we're going to talk about some really big concepts here, which is nothing new, I know, to you Headroom listeners. A gentleman who I've never had on before, who I met earlier in the year. He's from Ireland, at least he sounds like it, and he's written a book called Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation. This book is about the mythology of Atlantis. It's about the biblical anomalies. It's a grand overview of everything theological, even going back to the Native Americans, looking at some of the similarities in the mythology and folklore, and the underlying root of the fall of man. This is going to be a very interesting interview. It's a pleasure now to welcome to the Headroom program Michael Tsarion. Michael, thanks for joining us here today.
No problem, Rob. It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Now, I mentioned earlier that you were from Ireland. That's a pretty big place. Whereabouts in Ireland are you from?
I'm from Belfast City, actually.
Okay. All right. And you're living in America now?
Well, yes. I've been over in the States for a while, especially in regards of the work with the book and doing different conferences and talks.
Yeah, it keeps you pretty busy.
In Ireland, it's a little bit of a difficulty when you research any type of alternative subject matter.
Really?
Yeah, well, even, sometimes you have to go away from the mountain in order to, be able to see it. A lot of people in the States, for instance, who are more passionate about Celtic and Gaelic and Druidic traditions than there are even in my own country, which is, of course, very lamentable, but there you have it.
Well, so you're saying that you enjoy a bit more freedom in the U.S. To discuss this, to promote this
subject matter.
Really?
Well, my family, I'm part Indian, and my mother was from the Himalayas, and so we grew up, in a tradition which is involved in yoga, which is involved in mysticism, metaphysics. This is from the 60s and 70s I'm talking about, so when you have that kind of attitude of free thinking, growing up in a place that's very constricted by religion, that's very backward in these kinds of ways, you're marginalized, to say the least. I mean, my mother was like a world-famous clairvoyant, known all over the world, and yet she could barely advertise in Northern Ireland, in just a regular way. Of course, you can do it now, but in those days, they prohibited you to even run an advertisement to, you're a clairvoyant. So this is ridiculous. It's almost like living in the Middle Ages, but there you have it. And when it comes to really going into some very, what are considered even today, taboo areas of research, it just was a place which was far too restricting. It's very difficult to get the material, even in bookstores. I found, just to get, say, the works of Madame Blavatsky or, certain tomes, it was very difficult to get those books to research it. Whereas in America, of course, as you well know, there's a metaphysical bookstore pretty much in every block,
Yeah. How about that? Yeah, things are much more available. Well, your book goes
now, of course.
Yeah.
But, I'm talking about through the pretty much the hard times of 60s, 70s, and 80s when metaphysics as a subject was frowned upon,
Yeah. Well, your book really goes into a lot of areas, and I was saying some pretty big statements at the beginning of all this, that we're going to discuss how evil came into this world and the New World Order, the suppression of indigenous races. What's the beginning point from all this? Let's talk a little bit about Atlantis, because that's the cover of your book. What is Atlantis beyond what Socrates told us?
That's a good point, Rob, because you see, the issues, the tribulations, any of the social dysfunctions, the problems, quote-unquote, that we're having in the modern ages, and I'm talking right through the industrial age right up to the modern time, these are not things that just sort of popped out of the blue during those periods of time. The origin of our problems, socially, politically, militaristically, economically, psychologically, these problems have a beginning. They have a birth date. They come from the pre-Diluvian period, which is before the flood, right back into the time of the ancient civilizations that now, luckily, people are starting to really accept scientifically that these things existed. I mean, because of the work of people like Michael Cremo and, some guests that you had on.
Yeah, just recently, as a matter of fact.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Richard Milton, who is, the Observer magazine scientific correspondent, no less, who wrote an incredible book called Shattering the Myths of Darwinism, because of some of the work that Graham Hancock has done. Mm-hmm. People have to take notice that, wait a minute, we have evidence here we've always had it, of course, but now again we have to revisit this and say, my goodness, was there ancient civilizations? Well, of course we know that there was, but they are not there now.
Yeah.
So the point is, okay, even if Atlantis existed, fine and dandy, why is it that we can't find it? Why is it that it's not there anymore? And why is it that the orthodox fundamentalist paradigm approach denies the existence of any types of civilizations prior to about 7 to 10,000 years ago? And I am stating that not only do we have this information, but there was these thriving civilizations, and most importantly, the most important thing to realize about this ancient times is that what we call today evil, or what we refer to as inhumanity, injustice, this particular, penchant in human beings for just destruction.
Naughtiness.
Yes. You name it, and of course that can be the soft inhumanity or the soft immorality that we all have inside ourselves about, the smaller level injustices and crimes that we go on in our domestic lives, all the way up to the serial killer, through that all the way up to the mass murderers in government. We have a phenomenon in our midst. Yeah. We have never fully addressed. We've looked to the religion to answer it, and they have made things even worse. We've looked to science, and they're not interested in the moral question. So we have to start re-looking at the myths of our ancestors and to the ancient legends and mythologies for an answer to this all-important problem of evil, because if we don't answer it, we are basically passing this on.
It's funny. I'm just reminded of a portion in Ronald Reagan's former U.S. president's speech he made to the United Nations and several other places where he talked about this alien presence.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, and he described this threat that's already among us, this alien presence, and he talked about how he characterized this alien presence as kind of the dark side of humanity.
That's right. He said, I have heard about that, and where he talks about if there was suddenly a threat from some other world.
Yes.
It was actually at the United Nations that he made this speech, and he suddenly branches off. Of course, none of this is done by accident. He suddenly branches off into this whole thing about threats from outer space and so on. But a lot of people in the research community have heard that speech, but what they probably haven't heard is the very last sentence that he said. And he said that now this is in September 21st. Okay, 1987. I have the full quote. If people want to contact me, I can give them this.
Oh, I've played the quote on the air. Yeah, it's absolutely there. It's absolutely true.
Have you the last sentence where he says, "And yet I ask, is not an alien force already amongst us?"
Yes.
There are only a handful of people who know the truth about this.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Yeah, good. I'm glad that you have that, because over here it will be played, but it'll only be the first part. He will not actually say, or they will not actually play. The last sentence where he says they're already amongst us.
I know that's what makes the Headroom kind of different from other crappy news agencies and other shoddy or corporately owned outlets for information. We actually give you the whole deal. We don't use sound bites or sound clips or everything. We let everything roll here on this show.
These subjects are so important that they simply cannot be done in a soundbite fashion.
Not at all.
Everyone has these questions. Everyone genuinely has questions to the mysteries of being, to what is going on. And as I was saying, we're not going to find the answers to some huge existential life problems like the question of evil if we are looking to the Royal Academy, the Royal Society, and all of these different fakers and liars that have been in existence from the Tudor dynasty onwards, telling us about our genetics, telling us about it's just nature. Here's this thing that we call nature, which is in perfect balance, right? From the neutron star level down to the subatomic level, is in perfect harmony. Yet it should make such a blunder, right, with its highest creation, its highest species, man, should suddenly just make a blunder and put in this human being, right, put in you and me and everybody listening, this proclivity that is so damaging even to its own order that man would destroy himself.
Yes.
We're meant to believe that nature would just make a flub like that. Nothing could be further from the truth. It is, as my book shows, it is constant tinkering with the laws of nature. It is constant interference in a bygone age with the perfect ordinances and laws of nature that has caused this schism within human beings, that they do the things that they do. I mean, do you know how many psychologists and anthropologists and sociologists and even well-meaning philosophers and all sorts of people have had debated for years about what it is that makes man different from the animals?
Okay.
The finest thinkers in this have come up with the answer, and the answer is pretty shocking. It is that man is the only species on Earth that is a mass murderer. man is the only species that kills for pleasure and delight, and enjoys relishing, the orgies of mass destruction that he's been doing since he's been on this planet. So the sad truth is that yes, man has certain differences from the animals, but the fact that he's a genocidal maniac and has these tendencies which can even undermine his own existence. We're murdering the planet, which again, flies in the face of our own survival. So
yeah, it's kind of true. I mean, even look at the elements. I mean, we play, dolphins play, we mourn the loss of our dead, so do elephants. They have rituals where they'll go back to where the bones are and kind of rummage around the bones of their ancestors. There are a lot of parallels between us and the animal world. But you're right, it does end with our proclivity for destruction.
Well, when's the last time you ever saw any, dinosaurs or dolphins line up with clubs, declaring war on another group of their own type and then relish in it so murderously? I'm not saying that violence in its own, place is unnecessary. Of course, it depends what angle you're coming from here. I'm speaking with a broad brush here about the whole movement, and my research has shown that this is not a creation of the erstwhile movement of nature. It is actually something that happened to us in the days of Atlantis. I got interested in this when I was 13 in Ireland, studying the ancient megaliths there, putting two and two together, looking at those incredible Earth zodiacs that were discovered by Lady Catherine Maltwood and by Mary Kane.
Right. Well, wasn't that mostly around Avebury?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's also the one in Kingston, south of London, and certainly the most famous ones are near Glastonbury.
Yes.
Those things fascinated me.
Yeah, well, let me just throw this in, too. You mentioned about all the armies lining up, and, I mean, mostly, if you look back in history, every time there was wars, it was about conformity, about religion, and about domination, imperialism, and, so if you look at the motivations for a lot of these wars that we've had, certainly it's usually in the name of conformity and not revolution.
You got it.
That the overwhelming percent, over 95% of all the bloodshed.
If you do your homework, people will discover that the so-called, wars that were meant to be about freedom, or they were meant to be under the banner of communism, were nothing more than the same secret societies moving with another fake, carrot to get people into yet another form of enslavement. But by thinking that they're going to be free, there's the U.S. Constitution was one of these glowing documents. It had nothing to do with freedom, or
liberty
for the ordinary folks who were pushing the wheel till this day, as we can now see what's happening in the world. No, it was a decorated, camouflage document that would always empower the leaders, always empower the rich, the powerful, and the famous. But it had really nothing to do with, justice and liberty for all. This is the way that the governments work. Now, in context to the Atlantis, I get interested in this because after studying these, anomalies way back there in the 70s in Ireland and in England, it dawned on me that there's so much disinformation. I mean, one of the things we have to face here is that we have a lot of disinformation about Atlantis and about all of these other areas. So my work was prompted by that. I got a sore about that and just realized that a lot of what even researchers are saying in this field, a lot of what they're even writing in their books, is simply not accurate. It does not cross-reference.
Right.
I'm not going to mention specific names here, but you see, a great deal of majority of the work out there on these ancient subjects is simply not accurate because it is not properly cross-referenced with the ancient mythologies. We have to start treating the legends and the fairy tales, the folk tales, and the mythologies as a greater archive of wisdom than anything else that's been put before us in later ages.
What are you talking about? Books of what kind of? When you say that the works or the other research is not accurate, what are we talking about? Are we talking about literature? Are we talking about religious texts?
Talking about a lot of the New Age, especially a lot of the work in the New Age. It's going to have. Now, I'm not saying it's all in error. I'm just saying that there's glaring errors, which my book clears up. The whole idea about Atlantis versus Lemuria. The very idea that we have, for instance, that when you hear about the word Atlantis, we're often thinking about a paradisical place in which, the gods resided, and that there was peace and plenty for all, and all. Again, that whole idea that this is a super culture of advanced beings who are like the tutors of mankind, I mean, that's just one example. We have, look at the lies, right, and the fallacies that people like Michael Cremo and Richard Milton and Graham Hancock have cleared up in just regards to fossil record, right?
Oh man, yeah.
the hominid concept.
Oh, Graham Hancock. Yeah, he's done some amazing work with underground. Well, he's
Or is it the same kind of disinformation, same kind of problems, or even in deeper areas than that? What they've cleared up is important to have cleared up, but believe me, that is not the only source of disinformation that we have just about the fossil record. We have disinformation at a colossal level regarding the interference with the DNA of the human beings. My book goes into the fact that we were visited here about 50,000 years ago by beings who set up Atlantis and who subsequently, after coming here to this planet, these are the original fallen angels that I'm talking about, the Nephilim that the Bible and many other scriptures of the world talk about. Individuals then began, or they initiated, a long-term hybridization program in which they crossed their DNA with the human DNA, with our ancestors' DNA, creating a particular being that I refer to in my book as Homo Atlantis. Because we've heard of Homo sapien, obviously, but Homo sapien, the individual that we are, every single human being on this planet, descends from this remarkable being, Homo Atlantis, that was created, fabricated, hybridized on Atlantis by the visiting alien beings here. And this is what? It's not just made up. This is what the ancient mythologies of the world, especially of Celtic Ireland.
Oh, right. Well, let's...
The Rig Veda.
Yeah, there's a lot of supporting text. There's a lot of supporting passages in religious gospel about this. You mentioned about how the Nephilim were here, and of course in Genesis, the Old Testament talks about Noah, but right before Noah, there's a couple lines where it says that these gods were on earth and they mated with the women. I have the book is replete. My particular book again goes to innumerable sources. I have the very quotes that you're talking about, and out of the story of Noah, and nobody can figure that out.
No.
Why they would have this bizarre few sentences before the story of Noah about these gods coming down and kind of shagging earth women. It's strange.
Exactly. You have, for instance, the head of Sanskrit. This is the most ancient language in the world, Sanskrit. The head of Sanskrit at Madras University in India is called Dr. Raj Haven.
Okay.
And he said that 50 years of researching and translating, the ancient works, the Vedic works, convinces him that there are living beings on other planets and that they visited this Earth. And he says there's just a mass of fascinating information about flying machines, even fantastic weaponry that's been found in these translations. And of course, what happened around the 19th century when these books like the Rig Veda, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita were being translated into English, guess what? These passages that refer to the Vimanas, the flying ships, and the weaponry were left out. This is what I'm talking about. We have in the mythologies of the world a great deal of censorship.
Yes. Well, wait, mythologies, but are the Vedas considered mythology?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, the same thing can be said about the Old and New Testament. They've been vetted. Well, not about the Old Testament, and the New Testament.
But exactly. And then also, it's put before us in such a way that nobody would want to read it because the only place that we're actually, introduced to the Bible is in Sunday school and church. So, of course, nobody's going to pick one up on their own free time.
I know.
Because it's been so put to them in the wrong way.
I know. I'm just like everybody else. When I first learned that there are other books that never made it into the New Testament,
right.
I was like, what? It's an awakening that we're going through. And what you're talking about is true. If it's just if you're part of the Church of England or something, and you start finding out about the Bible, how it was put together, the New Testament part of it anyway, then you start to see man's influence. And then when you compare it to all the other sacred texts around the world, some that things that have been kept in indigenous communities is one thing, but stuff that has given out over a mass amount of people, like the Vedas and other very large books. Then you start to see, wait a second, the hand of man comes in. And is it safe to say that the hand of man generally always comes in with the same purpose? When I say hand of man, I mean this influence that censors.
Well, let's be under no doubt about it whatsoever. There is definitely censorship of ancient documents. I mean, there's only 1/10 of the books that have ever been written that you and I and the rest of your listeners will ever see. We take it for granted that we just walk into a bookstore, pick up a book, and we have knowledge in front of us. We don't understand how much has been sequestered, how many incredible writers down through time. I mean, the Vatican alone has 25 miles, okay? I'll repeat that, 25 miles of underground library passages with books on it. Many of the think tanks, like the Hoover Institute and the Tavistock Institute in London, many of these organizations, universities, collegiates, think tanks have sequestered books So we're dealing with a massive sequestering campaign because it's very important for the world leaders, the world elite, to not allow the ordinary human being to understand some fundamentals about themselves. We have lies told about our own biology, about our own genetics, about our own psychology, and the most, as Voltaire and Rousseau and others have said, the most faked subject of all is history. I mean, the manipulation of history. Now, I've often tell my audiences that, yeah, surely we know that history, including in that religious history, all of the rest of it, is one of the most boring subjects anybody could want to be.
No, it's not that boring.
No, but what I tell people, the study of the manipulation of history, the study of how history has been manipulated, that is one of the most important of all subjects, and that's what inspires a lot of the people that I work with.
Oh, I know. It's a huge motivating factor. Would you agree with me when I say that most of the history that's taught in university and schools is a load of shite?
Well, I would say that exactly. And in fact, Eustace Mullins, the great conspiracy researcher in America, he said that nothing is a greater guarantee of ignorance than attending an American university.
Yeah. Well, they don't teach real mathematics. They don't teach real economics. They don't teach real history.
No, they teach what you're meant to know. We're free to know exactly what we're meant to be told.
It really is
what
true.
What I'm talking about is the life of individual research based on a passion to believe what my eyes are telling me.
Okay, well, you know what? Let's step out of this for a moment. Let's step back from all of this, and let us say that from the very beginning that there was no censorship, that all the schools have been teaching all the real knowledge, and all the sacred knowledge and esoteric knowledge that's been handed down through the millennia has been freely dispersed, and it's never been censored, and there's never been a secret society here, there, or anywhere that has done any of the things that we know that have been done. What kind of world would we be living in?
Well, first of all, we'd be living in, I would believe that we would be living in the world that we all know existed inside our deeper recesses of our mind. Human beings are capable of putting up with each other. I'm not going to use broad terms like loving one another. That's probably too far-fetched. But we would be living in a state of deep respect for each other. The same way that we're capable of within our families, we would be treating humans like that, and more importantly, we'd be treating Earth like that. We would not be in any type of the situation today. It has to be understood that these forces who came here in the pre-Diluvian era have been systematically and methodically controlling the flow of history to suit their own agenda, that human beings are nothing but test tubes to them. In fact, they think of them, as the ancient texts clearly show you, these masters of ours think of us as nothing but their own children that they can dispose of whenever they want. We are considered slaves. That's what the Maya Popol Vuh book will tell you.
Maya Popol Vuh? That went over my head. What's that?
The Popol Vuh is one of the last codexes that was not burned by the Spanish conquistadors. In my book, I have passages from the Popol Vuh that literally show you. There's chapters, I think, if I can find it, but there's a quote from the Popol Vuh that says, "Let us make obedient servants to serve us, because we are the gods, and we want to create a being will in fact, serve us in the correct manner." I have the quote here somewhere. I'll up with it very soon.
I mean, anytime you're in a hierarchy, you're always going to want to sort of stabilize your position of power. Everything that you're doing with all your friends, all the people that are at the top, are going to want to either with tacit approval or with direct intervention, going to want to maintain the status that they have and their ability to keep ruling, to keep in their position of power, to keep in their prominent...
Well, listen to this.
Yeah.
On that quote, Rob, listen to this. This is from the Popol Vuh. Now, remember, the conquistadors, just like in all countries of the world, right?
Yeah.
But in Mexico, just like in all other countries in the world, the ruling, dominant Christian, Judeo-Christian elites burned and massacred, right, and immolated books, texts, letters, scriptures. And of all of these books that were destroyed by the Spanish conquistadors, a few remained. And one of the most important books that people need to know about, it's as valuable as the Book of Enoch is, on the Western, the European front. The Popol Vuh, that's P-O-P-U-L, Vuh. Here's one quote from that book. It says, and this is the gods, these are the visitors that I'm talking about one of their creations. They say, "Let us make him who shall nourish and sustain us. What shall we do to be invoked, to be remembered in earth? We have tried with our first creatures, but we could not make them venerate us. So then, let us try to make obedient, respectful beings who shall nourish and sustain us." This is exactly the same type of condescending commentary that you find in the Book of Enoch, that you find in the apocryphal works that were not included in the Bible, and for many other myths and legends, that yes, there is such a thing as gods, but they're not the spiritual kind that we have been taught to believe in, down through the centuries. They are individuals, highly technical, advanced individuals who came here, a specific contingent of individuals that the Bible refers to as the Nephilim, the fallen angels, who came to this planet, set up their headquarters on Atlantis, what we are calling Atlantis, and have been subsequently ruling the world ever since. Not the original ones, of course, but their descendants, their bloodline. These individual aliens live for a very long time, but they are humanoid, they look like us, they have longer lifespans, and none of the original ones are around. It's their descendants who are now behind the thrones of government. That's why bloodline is such an important concept to these individuals of the royalty. Jordan Maxwell, other scholars, myself, we've researched the symbolism. We've researched the endless symbolism of the royal families, of the corporate world, of the business world, of the royal dynasties and elites of Europe. There's a whole message that needs to be unfolded here, the true timeline of human beings, because we're going to need to understand where we came from if we're going to solve, the massive problems that our world is facing now. We're in the 21st century. That means we're in a period that I refer to as solution think. We know what the problems are now. We've understood that there's bloodshed and genocide. A major cataclysm on the way. The Maya prediction of 2012, for instance, which says, we may not even be around after that period of time. We've got something going on here in history. We need to be very aware of it, but the secret lies in the ancient past.
When you talk about these bloodlines, it just makes me think of something we were talking about at the top of the hour, about how the presidents and perhaps even prime ministers of today are related to the kings and queens of Europe. And we're going to discuss that right after this. We're talking with Michael Tsarion, and we're talking about Atlantis, but we're talking about so much more. Michael, I was just saying about the bloodlines. It hasn't been, this isn't the first time that the idea of the presidents, the prime ministers are related to the kings and queens of Europe. What do you have to say on that? What do you have to say on the issue of this bloodline?
Could you repeat that?
The bloodlines of Europe. What do you have to say about them linking to American presidents?
I think that's a very, very important subject that people need to become very, very familiar with, because it came out by accident, sort of, in the first place. It's been known to people in the research community for a long time, but it never reached the public, except by sort of an accident. It was the people who kept Burke's peerage that actually noticed that the American presidents in particular have direct descendancy, very, very strong descendancy, from the royal dynasties of Europe. Edward Longshanks, Charlemagne. You're dealing with an oligarchy. You're not dealing with a democracy anywhere in the world. And that's why also things don't change. As David Icke brought out in his book, The Biggest Secret, and I was involved in contributing to his work, there was, it got leaked basically from the aristocracy that there are these bloodline links, and that we have operating in America individuals who have maybe, called Smith and Jones, right?
Okay.
Tom, Dick, and Harry, but believe me, these people are covered by their names because these families, these royal families of the world, have what are known as unofficial families. Yes, they put before us the girl next door, the official marriage, what have you. But what we have to become aware of is that these royal dynasties and a lot of their most powerful lackeys have unofficial families. That's whole other offspring. Okay, people who are completely unrelated, related to them, who grow up in other families, and then later as they grow up, they're groomed, they're royal blood, they're by royal descent. But then suddenly we see them as the head of this bank and the head of that think tank, and suddenly they become the head of this corporation, you see, or even this people's champion that's in the fashion and the media business. They could become rock stars. And we turn around and wonder, why does nothing ever change? Why does nobody in power ever get up and do something? Well, because a lot of the people who head the United Nations, who head these organizations, are actually, in fact, either directly bloodline connected to the same dynasties at the top of the pyramid, or are completely in their control.
Like who? Anybody in England, the royal family?
I'm going to say online, in the book I go into this, and in other talks, but I'm not going to publicly, point the finger and say certain names, but believe me.
Well, it's in the book, isn't it?
Yes. Oh, well, I'll tell you that the presidents, yes, if you want to know about from the president, John Kerry. It's incredible.
Well, John Kerry is cousins of George Bush.
Oh, and much more. Believe me, much more than that. The bloodline...
John Kerry, by the way, for those who might not be aware, was the guy who ran for president just a short while ago and lost.
Exactly. The presidential candidate that was so-called, right, of the Democratic side.
Yeah.
But, once we understand that, we have organizations like the Skull and Bones Fraternity, the Illuminati, these individuals who are running the show, we can, put aside any idea that there's any kind of a difference between these characters.
Well, that's the other thing, too, that they're both cousins. They both went to Yale, and, distant cousins, and they both were part of a very secretive, very small group of people who got to join a secret society called Skull and Bones at Yale.
Right.
So that's kind of, okay,
Listen to this. I mean, Harry himself, he is related to all the royal houses of Europe. He has more titled relations than President Bush.
Good heavens.
More. Burke's Peerage, which researches all these kinds of genealogies. You see, he is related through his mother. Now, this is coming down through his mother, Rosemary Forbes. He's related to the royal houses of Albania, England, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Russia, Byzantine, right? Persia, that's Iran, and France.
Yeah. Wow.
He is related to Queen Elizabeth II and 20 British dukes.
That's...
and then we turn around to the average person, unfortunately, on the street here in America, think that these individuals are just well-meaning rags-to-riches individuals who are just bending over backwards to save the world and save them from poverty and what have you. And as so many researchers, from Eustace Mullins to Jordan Maxwell, have said, we have the power to elect, but we do not have the power to select. We just can elect for the three Masonic goons that they put in front of us. And believe me, these people are not the ones giving the orders. They are taking the orders from people behind the scenes.
Well...
When I talk about behind the scenes, I don't mean just going back to, 15th century or even to the 1st centuries AD and the creation of Christianity. I'm talking about going thousands of years before that. We have to understand how old this conspiracy against the human race is, because its end game, Rob, is being played out now in our times. This new thing we call the Silicon Revolution, this whole movement to find space projectiles, that they've privatized that now. Paul Allen and you have Richard
travel.
Branson over on your end, everybody hurrying to take people out to outer space, and this whole new thing going on.
Richard Branson now is charging people a few $100,000 for a ride. Yeah. They
can't afford to, feed the homeless downtown, right? So we have an agenda going on with these overworld figures, what I call overworld figures, who are put before us like Pied Pipers to lead us in whatever direction they want us to go.
Yeah.
But why my work is catching on and why so many people are interested in my thesis is that I'm able to explain what the original agenda was of these beings that came to our planet and colonized.
Okay.
And that, in fact, that end game, because they've been working at it for a very long time. And I sketched the whole thing out in the book about exactly what they've been doing through these thousands of years. Yeah. But I'm also trying to get people to become aware. The end game is happening within the next 10 years.
Well, let's before we go back, because I want to talk to you about your sources and how you researched this and what did you draw upon to get this information about Atlantis and about the things that we've been talking about. Today, where does it stand today? I mean, where can we look to today? Who can we look to today that are really, responsible, that are really the people that are pulling the strings? Can we look at the Bilderbergers? Can we look at the Council for Foreign Relations? Is it the usual places, or do you have some other specific places that people can kind of hang some of this on right now?
You have to. Do you mean to veto in order to?
Well, in other words, who is it that's pulling the strings now? Who is it right now, as it stands? Where does all the power lie? Who's running the show?
The British royal family, who is an incredible network that is directly bloodline related to the individuals that I'm talking about, and everyone in the Commonwealth that they pretty much control. These individuals use insider names for themselves. So when we say words like Illuminati, these are historically documented terms that they use themselves. When we're talking about certain cabals within Freemasonry, Rosicrucians, different secret societies, there are terms that they use, and then there's terms that certain street-level people use. So there's a whole study of that in itself. Study of bloodline. There's a study of secret societies that needs to be gone into. The most important thing about my work is the sources, because if you look up the word conspiracy theory, say in a sociological dictionary, because of course when people talk like we do, immediately we're labeled as conspiracy nuts or conspiracy freaks, right? And it's like John Judge the American researcher, he said, I don't mind being called a conspiracy theorist by those who don't mind in return being called coincidence theorists, right? Yeah. But the point is that we are often labeled that. Now, in these documents, like they say a sociological dictionary, if you look up conspiracy theory, it says a conspiracy theory is only considered reprehensible or wrong if it is put forward overzealously and if it's not backed up by proper evidence, okay?
Well, that certainly wouldn't reflect on anything that we've ever done on this show.
Exactly. So therefore, people need to be aware of this. Okay, throw around the words conspiracy theory if you like, but realize that in my work and other people that I work with in this field, we're putting forward these facts, but we're putting them forward both eloquently. We're not overzealous about it. We're presenting the information that there is a worldwide conspiracy operating in the world.
Yeah.
Secret societies moving, and we're backing it up by the most eloquent information that you could possibly want.
Well, sure. I mean, like George Bush, the first one, part of the Carlyle Group, and so were a lot of people, a lot of the very rich, wealthy families in Saudi Arabia.
You got it.
So that had an effect how 9/11 rolled out. We had more reason to invade Saudi Arabia after 9/11 happened in the States than we did to invade Afghanistan.
But we have to understand why they were picking on Iraq, because Iraq...
Oh, well, no, Iraq was just like surgically attached to 9/11. Saddam Hussein didn't like Al-Qaeda. He kept them out. He kept he didn't like them any more than anybody else did.
It was a CIA creation. Period.
Well, so was Al-Qaeda, and so was Saddam. But at least Saddam did not, align himself with Al-Qaeda.
No.
Yeah.
And by the way, Saddam Hussein was trained and funded by the Western powers. You see, this is how government works from the time of Lord Palmerston and Lord Solms and the original division of Europe after the First World War by the Illuminati henchmen in London, right?
Okay.
Round table groups. They divided up the lands of the Middle East because they knew what was coming. They have put unlikely tribes beside each other, religious groups who don't, follow the same religions as each other. In Kosovo, in all over the world, they put unlikely racial groups beside each other because they wanted to foment it. And if you look at my work, you will see that this was done with a plan. They literally will tell you from their own works. I don't go to anybody but the horse's mouth. This is the tradition, because I understand that this is a controversial subject and people will knee-jerk against it and be skeptical, and so they should be. We should be skeptical of everything that comes in front of us. But when the evidence is there from the horse's mouth, from people like Carol Quigley, who is the guru of Bill Clinton, from Cecil Rhodes, from Woodrow Wilson, from Colonel Mandel House, from the people behind Roosevelt, when you have these individuals in their own words telling you...
Did you mean Cecil B. Rhodes?
Pardon? Yes.
The Rhodes Scholar of Rhodes Scholar?
The Rhodes Scholar.
What did
These individuals, if you read their own works, if you go to their own letters, their memoirs...
What did he have to say?
Pardon?
What did he have to say?
Cecil Rhodes, these individuals in their own writing are telling you that they're creating... Because organizations.
Yeah, he was a globalist.
World government, a one world system.
Yeah, he was a globalist.
That comes to your point.
Yeah.
You look at the symbols of the Illuminati. In fact, it's not hard to find one. You just, in America, take out a dollar bill and look at it. You'll see that there's a pyramid on it with the 13 levels, and the 14th part of the pyramid is detached at the top.
Yep.
This is their symbol for their way that they do the world control. And under the pyramid, you'll see Novus Ordo Seclorum, the New World Order.
Yeah.
They not only tell you in their words, they also tell you by symbols about exactly how they're doing it. The lower levels of the pyramid are under their control. They have a sort of a rules of engagement about how they control the world, how they move the ship of state. And at the top are the unseen ones that we're not meant to know about. Now, if you go to the works of Albert Pike, the head of the Illuminati in America, or his master, Giuseppe Mazzini, all the way back to the creator of the Illuminati, that's Adam Weishaupt, and you look at their own words, or all the so-called French revolutionaries of the Reign of Terror, I mean, these individuals are where you need to look, and they are not in any way disguising.
Yeah.
Remember, you know why? You know why? People go, well, why would they do that? Why would they put it into their books and memoirs? You know why? Because they did not expect that the human race would become educated enough. They had us working in mines, working in the factories, working in the mills, working,
They didn't think we could fathom it.
Exactly.
Well, what did this?
It wasn't that long ago.
Who is
two
this?
generations back.
Yeah. Who is this?
Hardly even enjoyed the luxury today of education.
Yeah. Who is this Giuseppe geezer you were telling me about?
Giuseppe Mazzini is known normally, historically, as one of the great revolutionary writers. He was a very copious writer. Okay. He came out of Italy. He's very much behind the Carbonari.
Oh, Carbonari, the kind of the federal police.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Carbonari is a secret society that eventually morphed and became what we know as the Mafia.
Aha.
A Cosa Nostra.
I thought they were police, though.
No, the Carbonari is a secret society.
Oh, I'm thinking okay, no, I'm thinking of something different. There's something very close to that, right? Okay.
Yeah, the Carbonari is a well-known Italian. Again, let me make an important point here. When we are reading official history, these individuals, like the IRA in Ireland, and the Baader-Meinhof in Germany, and the Triads in China, and the Alan Dombros of Spain, or whatever, we're always given to believe that these are literally of Spain, of Ireland, of China, of whatever. Again, that's another fallacy. These organizations are not localized to one area. Yes, the Hydra head may pop up in Ireland or in England or in some area, but who funds and arms to the teeth these organizations? Where do they get their money? Where do they get their symbolism? Right? These individuals may appear to be on the surface, homegrown, but they're not. They're part of a black market underworld terrorist organization, a network, a cabal that has been put there to foment disaster and mayhem in their own countries, under the guise of, okay, we're doing it for revolution. But if you study the history of most of these so-called terrorist organizations or revolutionary organizations, you will find that they're funded by the same hidden hands, and that goes for the IRA in Ireland, it goes for Sinn Féin, and I'm not saying on a street level where you have to agree, you don't agree with these people. I'm talking about history. I'm talking about their own records. The fact that the IRA comes from the Irish Republican Brotherhood, that comes from the society called the Green Ribbon Lodge, that comes from the ancient order of Hibernians, etc. These are secret societies that appear on the surface to move, but we have to understand where their roots are.
Oh, wow, never knew that. Interesting.
It goes for every single organization, every single so-called terrorist organization. I don't care if you're talking about the Tongs or the Triads or even some of the more modern ones that have appeared. I don't care if you're talking about the PLO. They are not as they appear to us on the surface. These individuals are funded from the higher parts of the pyramid.
What they do is they pit one side against the other.
Right.
They like duality.
Yep.
And so what is their underlying motivation for this continual unrest?
That, again, is the secret of that, is back in the pre-Diluvian period. When these individuals came here, the gods I'm talking about, these Nephilim, the fallen angels, in their policy to hybridize humans so that they would have slaves, basically to mine and do, just like Zachariah Sitchin and others have written, they wanted a slave race. But what my work has revealed, and again, through studying the ancient mythologies, what has happened was that their end game was delayed massively, because there is actually, about 13,500 years ago from today, 13,500 years ago, two factions of these visitors had a war. Now, I'm talking about a full-out global thermonuclear war that happened on this earth 13,000 years ago. The evidence is there in the fossil record, even though it's been covered up. And that war precipitated the destruction of the 5 great continents that were on this planet, which of course included where Atlantis was and Lemuria. So they're gone. These islands were wiped out. They didn't know this was going to happen, because what happened is that their ferocity of their war precipitated planetary upheavals as well, the likes of which Immanuel Velikovsky and others have labored to show that the planet responded with violence of its own, and the continents were sank, and a lot of their technological hardware also went with it. I mean, a great deal of it. So in fact, by unleashing this war, they did something they didn't expect, and that was that they precipitated very violent earth changes and upheavals, which then sank the continents of old. That's why they're not there, as we were saying at the top of the show, that what happened, we know about Atlantis is in the storybooks and it's in the mythologies, but where the hell is it? Well, the point is it's not there because it sank, it disappeared. But how did it sink and disappear? It did it through a war. This is the difference between my work and almost everyone else who writes on the subject of Atlantis. This was not just something that nature suddenly, got up one morning and said, okay, we're going to have, ice ages and...
okay, so what you're saying is it wasn't the explosive devices that destroyed the continent of Atlantis or the island of Atlantis. It was the subsequent earth changes
that were precipitated by the war. The ancient records, if you read them, if you get the book I've done, you will read.
See, that makes sense, because you can blow up as many nuclear or atomic bombs as you want, but there's still going to be rock there. It wouldn't destroy a landmass.
Believe me, because I'm cutting a lot short here, but this was a war that was of such ferocity that they say that the atmosphere and the air, the very atmosphere, the liquid, the water, the what you call the moisture in the atmosphere incinerated. That in turn affected the magnetic sheath of our planet, the ionosphere, the Roche limit, what they call the Roche limit, and that precipitated calamity on the Earth and changed the magnetic power of the Earth.
The poles?
Yes, the poles, which precipitated not an Earth flip. I mean, you have to get this right. It
Pole
wasn't
shift.
the Earth turned over. It swiveled. It moved to its present location where it is now.
Okay.
And that is such a tremendous event. Now,
Right.
see, the science is in. If you had said this 10, 15 years ago, people could rightly have said, wait a minute, you're talking rubbish. But see, my work rests on the scientific evidence coming out of Oxford and Cambridge University, from MIT, these scholars like Alan and Dallaire, like Richard Milton, like Otto Binder. These individuals have proven beyond all shadow of a doubt that we had 5, not 1, but 5 continents, just like the ancient Celtic books are saying. We had 5 ancient continents on this planet that are no more. Not 1, but 5.
Wow.
They all sank beneath the waves during a great earth cataclysm, and the ancient mythologies have been saying that all along. They talk about the gods and the coming of the gods. They talk about the war of the gods. They talk about the upheavals. We're talking about tsunamis. This just happened. There's a perfect example. I can't help watching that in my mind, you see. I go back to the most ancient of days, where that's just a small, pathetic example of the types of cataclysms that our Earth, if very recently in history, has actually suffered. Now, come back to your point.
Yeah, the reason why this ongoing
and why there's been a delay.
Effort of continuing this unrest.
Right, and that's because.
Oh, by the way, if you add up all the history of humanity, at least the one that's on the current record books, there's only been about 3 months of peace.
Yeah.
If you added up all the days where there hasn't been a war anywhere on the planet, it comes out to a cozy a month or so.
Isn't it incredible?
Yeah.
Blink of the eye in history. Now, the thing that we have to understand is that this, of course, was not. Maybe it's because of the size of the planet, or that they hadn't fully understood how the planet would react because there were recent visitors here. Whatever. This Earth. I mean, you can't carry on business as usual when your continent has sank, when the spaceships that you've come in have been crushed like eggshells, when your cybernetic capacities, your supercomputers, your organic computers, your hardware, and all your weaponry is pretty much destroyed, a great deal of it. So what happened was that there was the end date was delayed for, in fact, many millennia. So you're not going to believe this, but the proof is that what happened was that these individuals, these Nephilim, decided to manipulate the flow of history to push mankind forward to the point where they would be able to rebuild, the technology, the hardware, that was lost to them in the original War of the Gods. And that's exactly, and I'm being very brief about this, of course, there's more to this story than that, but if you want a timeline, a basic timeline to get your mind around what we're seeing today, is that the industrial age, what we call the industrial age, and now moving into the silicon age, is in fact the final, and in fact the dropping of the atom bomb at Trinity, at Alamogordo, on July 19th.
Okay. Yeah.
Or July 16th, was a very, very, very important milestone in this particular movement, because that was when they give themselves a pat on the back that they had at least, got so far that the descendants of these individuals had now been able to find out one of the most key things that they brought from another planet that they originally knew, which was how to release energy from matter. This is something that these advanced alien beings on their own planet, were doing, and much, much more. And every year since then, we've been moving forward. And MIT and SRI and many of these other organizations that appear to be on the surface one thing dealing with genetics and super technologies. I used to live in the Bay Area, so I had plenty of time to go around and look and research this.
Okay.
About exactly what the agenda of these so-called Silicon Valley companies is really about and who funds them.
Yeah.
Right, this kind of thing is the movement. So we are actually approaching the times.
What's really going on in Silicon Valley?
What?
What's really going on in Silicon Valley?
What's going on is what I'm saying, that there is an agenda to build back the technology. That's why is it that so many people in this world, not just Rod Serling and Gene Roddenberry and everybody else that work in the media, but so many other people amongst us, we have questioned why it is that our technological advancement in this world, right? It's always been said that one of the problems with the human race is that its technological or scientific advancement is so far in advance of our psychological and emotional,
the ability to control it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what's normally put in front of us.
Yeah.
But the reason is exactly what I'm saying. Of course it's out in front of us, because for the last 11 to 13,000 years, it has been literally put on the agenda as the most important thing by a particular group of people or entities who are manipulating the flow of history so that in fact will happen, that man is just being used to push science and technology forward to the point where they can build back their spaceships, build back their scientific technology to the point that they had it when they came here.
Yeah. Well, we've never built a weapon we haven't used. And all this push for this very black budget technology is not controlled by one group.
not one group.
Because you have black budget things, you have black operations and things going on in Russia and in America and the UK. They're doing all kinds of stuff.
In fact, the whole division of the world into the communist countries and the Western countries was precisely so that, again, a physical wall would be built so that we would never know what was going on by the same hidden hand funding Russia.
Yeah.
What better way to conceal what's going on than literally divide the country into two states, two separate warring factions on paper, so that behind that, in the Lebedev Institute and all of these Russian institutes, you have all of the main work going on that would never be seen by the eyes of the West. Again, part of an occult agenda. Now, remember, what we're talking about is not official history. Granted, if people are listening to this and thinking, what on earth is
this is alternative history.
What I'm talking about.
Yeah, 101.
Unofficial history, alternative history, but it's the true history of the world, not the one that's been put before you.
No.
We have to start connecting dots. What I deal with in my book and my work is what I call the picture on the jigsaw box. Yes, many people have pieces of the puzzle, but you see, we're kind of late in the day here, Rob. We don't need more bloody mysteries and more questions. We need answers, and we need them now. I deal with the image that's on the cover of the massive jigsaw that every one of us is playing in this world. We now need to see the big picture. What exactly has been going on this planet? Why we're so blood, like you say, for so many centuries, and what possibly is the end game? If
what the hell? Well, you know what? I was just going to mention before, when there was this massive devastation to the Earth some more than 10,000 years ago, and changed the axis of the Earth?
Yes, it did.
It did a good job. I mean, I have to say, whatever happened, it did it really well, because it put us in almost perfect equilibrium with the moon. And it created seasons. It made things. It seemed to be a bit advantageous in some ways. And some people would look at that kind of, well, how could it be if this cataclysm happened that it would just so happen to kind of align things in a way that really suits the equilibrium of.
Well, remember, we don't know that for sure because we don't know what came before. We
well,
have
that's
no
true.
memory.
That's true.
What came before, and they say that the experts are saying that. They use a word called tholiiform. Tholiiform means that the Earth's axis was perfectly straight.
Oh.
We have what was called by the ancient Roman poets called ver perpetuum, perpetual spring. So again, and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, in their fictional works, they talk about ver perpetuum and the pre-Diluvian era and how people lived in harmony with the animals and harmony with nature. So again, what you say is right, but we don't know exactly what our... See, remember, every one of our ancestors was genetically hybridized, and the rest were all massacred. So we have no...
Maybe birds never migrated before the cataclysm.
Like that.
Because there were no seasons.
Kind of world, and we don't really know what it is, except coming from the minds of the great writers of fiction like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and George MacDonald and others like that, and Ursula Le Guin in this country, who've written many fascinating works.
Oh, there's a lot on it. Well, let me ask you this. What about this hand, what you call a black hand or the unseen hand?
Well, that's right. The unseen hand is this hand. The secret society, again.
There's a lot of...
Go no further.
There's a lot of secret societies.
Right, but look at their own symbolism.
But they're not connected. Like, how are they connected? Who are the... What's the method? Is it the Bilderbergers? By the way, the Bilderbergers are well established. I even often read the people who attend this Bilderberger meeting that happens every year in complete secrecy, away from the press, and it's all these CEOs of these large multinational corporations, it's former prime ministers and heads of states, it's just this amazing power elite get-together. Is this part of this unseen hand?
They are part of it, but they're still a very lower rank. There's a certain rule of thumb that can be used.
All right.
And that is, if you know about them, like that means if we, the human race, know about them, like they have like the Bilderbergers, they're known, they have websites, they have books, they have... The very fact that we even know about them means that they're of a much lower rank. They are part of a secret network.
Okay.
Their own works tell you that. They're not trying to hide it. Of course, they hide it in plain sight. They know that
what's the level above the Bilderbergers?
Right. They know that we are so usually stressed out, overworked, underpaid.
Mm-hmm. That we're hold on. But wait, hold on, because we know about the Bilderbergers.
We know about
who's
their lower level?
Yeah, what's the next tier?
Well, I can tell you who's at the top.
Yeah, let's go.
We don't need to go through the whole tier. The top of the tier is what they call the Council of Nine, or the individuals, the bloodline descendants from these original alien visitors, okay? These are individuals who are directly bloodline connected. Now, some would say, from my work, that we're all bloodline connected because they hybridized us.
Kind of.
There are certain families are directly connected, meaning that they have stronger alien DNA, right?
And these Council of Nine is somebody who's never sort of stepped foot in public, has no public life?
Well, they may have stepped in public,
we don't know about them.
We don't know for sure, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that those who are behind the royal families, we may know them, we may not, but I am absolutely convinced that they originally came down. If you want the specifics of this, when Atlantis fell.
Well, hold on. I'll tell you what. Let's get the specifics right after we just pause for the cause here, just to let everybody know what they're listening to.
Okay.
With Michael. Michael, we were just about to really stab at the heart of this beast that has been controlling events on this planet. But first, let me just tell people that we are talking about your book, Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation. Where can people go if they want to take a look at all of this and perhaps pick up your book?
Well, we have a website, and there's an Atlantis page on the website which has a shopping cart, and it has a instant, conversion rate. So
yeah.
They can go to the Atlantis page on my website, and that's at taroscopes.com. Now, that's all one word, and it's plural. Taroscopes, Taroscopes. It's like the word tarot and the word scopes, like horoscopes.
Okay.
But it's all one word with one T. Taroscopes. Taroscopes.com. Just go to the Atlantis page.
Okay, we were just about to really get into the meat of all this stuff. This Council of Nine, right?
Or the elites at the top of the pyramid, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, listen to this.
Yeah, I mean, how does it work? I mean, these guys, do you really think it's 9 people?
Well, that's just a term. Remember I told you that there's certain terms they use, and then there's certain terms that have just come down to us?
Okay.
But listen to this first. Remember we were talking earlier about Giuseppe Mazzini, literally the head of the Illuminati?
Yeah.
Right, well, the head of the creator of the Illuminati was called Adam Weishaupt, and it was officially created in 1700s, right? Exactly the same year that America was founded, 1776. When Adam Weishaupt died, the reins of the Illuminati went into the hands of Giuseppe Mazzini. And remember I told you that my book I deal with their own comments? Listen to this. This is a writing from a letter of Giuseppe Mazzini. Because before I answer your question, I want your audience to listen to this. It says, this is Giuseppe Mazzini's own words. He says, "We form an association of brothers in all points of the globe. Yet there is one unseen that can hardly be felt, yet it weighs on us. Comes it? Where is it? No one knows, or at least no one tells. This association is secret, even to the veterans of the secret societies." And then his descendant, Albert Pike, used the same language. Many of the head of World Freemasonry, that's the Duke of Brunswick, also used the same, types of terminology that, yes, they understand that they're an order, and you have the 33rd degrees, and you have these Illuminati degrees, but beyond that, above that, and again, you only have to look at their own symbolism. The very pyramid that is their own symbol that was found on the documents of the Illuminati has a detached pyramid above it, a pyramidon.
The all-seeing eye of Horus.
All-seeing eye of Horus, but it's detached, as you know, from the actual 13 levels below it. So
it's floating.
Right. So myself and Jordan Maxwell especially, I'm talking about Jordan Maxwell, the American scholar, he and I have been thinking very deeply about this, about who in fact are the overworld figures. Who are these individuals who are at the top of the pyramid? Now, I have researched it through the legends of the ancient world, through the Celtic and Arthurian tradition. I've cross-referenced it with all other mythologies of the world to find out who these people are. We referred to them in ancient times as the gods. And these are the Nephilim, the fallen angels that literally came to this planet from their own solar system, from their own planetary systems in which they had a falling out. They had a war of their own planet. They were pursued here to our planet, and they came here. And the descendants of these individuals, are this particular council. Now, we were talking about the specifics because, again, very important for people to realize that there is documented evidence of this. Now, what happened in short is that after the cataclysms that we were talking about, after the Earth had changed its polar alignment, the Nephilim, the fallen angels, had to regroup. Right? They had to regroup in the only part of the world that would sustain life all the year round, which happened to be the equator, the new equator, of course, which is Asia Minor. Asia Minor, and near especially the equatorial zone, was the only place that would sustain life all the year round after these horrendous cataclysms that our Earth has suffered. Now, that was the rising, and is it not from Asia Minor, from Sumeria, Babylon, and Assyria, and Persia?
Yeah, the great civilizations.
What we call the historical empires, these bloodlust empires, rise? Yes, it is. But who was at the foundation of those empires? Well, it's just like Zachariah Sitchin, the Anunnaki, the Nephilim. They regrouped there, and our official history opens from those periods. So this is where we connect the dots. Those empires that just happened, to appear in the Middle East, that just happened to have all these cultural anomalies and idioms fully formed, like mathematics and basket weaving and empire building and agriculture, just out of the blue. No modern official historian who's just gone to college to learn or to be mistaught can tell you how all of these things just have come about with no antecedent stages. Well, now we know the answer, is that we had ancient civilizations that crushed and were destroyed. New empires were formed at the equatorial area, and it is from those dynasties that the modern dynasties come down, as David Icke and others have shown. Yes, that's why the terminology of the British royal family, and before David Icke came on the scene, I was researching this with the works of the British Israelite movement.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So we have the small group of people, and they started things up in Samaria, and but how does it work today with this group?
Listen to this.
Oh, okay.
It's very fascinating.
All right.
As they set up their dynasties there, one of the other groups that comes out of the ancient world that we need to pay specific attention to is the Phoenicians. These are people that are Sumerian. The most powerful race in the world is known to be the Semitic race. Right? People have heard of the Semitic race. The Semitic race is the largest racial group in the world. But all racial groups have lower class members, right? It's sad to say, but we have lower class members and they have elites. Now the elite of the Semitic race is called the Phoenician people. P-H-O-E-N, right? Phoenician. These were the great maritimers. These were the great temple builders. These were the great navigators who... they're also known to be the people who built most of the ancient megaliths, along with the Celtic people who are descended from them.
Well, there's been rocks found in Australia with Phoenician writing on it.
Exactly. So the Phoenicians got to every corner of the globe because they were the descendants of these Nephilim that I'm talking about. They were highly advanced people. But we know them in history books as the Phoenicians. Now, when the Phoenicians start to conquer into Europe, as Lyndon LaRouche and others have shown, what happened was that the European people couldn't pronounce the PH. So the PH of Phoenician became V for Venetian. So when we're talking about Italy and the rise in Italy of the merchant class, the great dynasties of the Borgias, the Paduas, the Genoas, and the famous Medicis, right? These dynasties, and not to mention the rise of what we are calling the Vatican, right, which again is different than Roman Catholicism, but the edifice that we know as the Vatican, many of the idioms that come out of Italy are descended from the group called the Venetians, who originally were the Phoenicians. What happened to the Venetians if we move along in history? The Venetians have endless wars over in Europe until they're finally ousted, right? And they make a move out of Venice, out of Italy, and move, guess where? Through Prague up into Holland. What happens in Holland? The rise of the House of Hanover, the rise of the House of Orange, that should be famous to most of the people in Britain who are hearing this, King William III and so on. But the House of Hanover, by the way, is connected to the Hanoverians, to the Habsburgs, which goes back to the Venetians. Okay, what happens from Holland? Where does the House of Hanover end up in history? British Isles. They come and conquer the Stuarts, do they not? And enter into England and take over the English crown in what was called the Glorious Revolution. And then is it not from those periods that the empires rise, that eventually we have the colonization of the United States of America and so on? So I'm, again, cutting an enormous subject very short here.
Yeah.
But there is a direct thread for people who are interested in this. Believe it. It can be studied. There is a direct link from the ancient Sumerians, from the ancient Atlanteans through the Sumerians, as Zachariah Sitchin has shown, coming down through the Phoenician dynasty, as many, many scholars have shown, like L.A. Waddell, all the way up to Lyndon LaRouche, the modern scholar who's looked at this.
Yeah.
Moving in through Venice, creating what we know to be the Renaissance, the modern age. I mean, the modern age and the Renaissance has a particular birth date, It comes from somewhere, as we all know. It comes from Italy. Who created it? Then those great thinkers of the Neoplatonic schools, the bringing of science. What was the hallmark of the Renaissance? Development in science. That's right. Then these individuals come and set up their dynasties, move their banks and their whole enterprise, all of their arsenals, all of their shipping, their trade routes, and so on to Holland. And from Holland we have the rise of what? Protestantism, Lutheranism, Calvinism, coming in with the Protestant work ethic. We have something going on here. Those individuals then colonize the British Isles. It's official documented history.
So we've ended up back.
People are shivering, right, in castles and can hardly pay the rent.
Right.
They have to tax the people to the nth degree, right? They have no money.
So what you're saying is we've ended up.
Empires coming out of England. We have a world empire.
Michael, what you're saying is we've ended up back at the royal British family.
We are with the Tudor dynasty, exactly. The Tudor dynasty is the one that you really need to look at.
It's interesting to think that right now this radio station is broadcasting in London and over the palace, Buckingham Palace, right now. Who knows? Maybe there's somebody inside listening to us.
I wouldn't doubt it. And
you wouldn't doubt it?
No.
Why is that?
That's I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, it's a big place. There's a lot of people there. Maybe there's somebody of royalty listening to us right now.
Perhaps. I think what I'm concerned about is that the ordinary people who need to overthrow these tyrannical groups are listening, so that they will get a grip on who has been doing what to whom for many millennia.
Right. Well, how is it then? Now, what's the interaction between this surviving group, this Council of Nine, these unseen folks, who, as you say, have a very high proportion of alien DNA?
Right, exactly. Good.
How do they interact with, say, the Vatican, the royal family? What's the method there?
Through meetings, like the
you just can't drive up there, or are they already in there? I mean, how does it work? How do they meet?
Present to this. They do it like everywhere else.
Yeah.
Have you seen James Bond, the whole Spectre idea?
Yeah.
Right? Just watch. They'll tell you. Hey, you don't need to ask me. Watch the movies. The movies are the means by which these secret societies communicate to us, their lackeys, showing how they do it. The movie Stargate, the whole slew of movies coming out now about Doomsday. You just watch what they're using symbolistic.
I've seen the movie. I've seen National Treasure and The Matrix and The Man Who Would Be King and all that sort of stuff.
They aren't made just for entertainment. They're made as archives along the way. It's just like the way the Renaissance artists used to put coded messages into their art. Well, they're doing the same today in the movies. If you know how to decode it, if you have symbolic literacy, you will see that they're giving you the message.
Well, it just seems that the policies that are made in America, in Europe, in the UK, have all sorts of different pulls and all sorts of different influences, and the royal family really doesn't have that much say in what goes on in politics. So how does the will of this Council of Nine get translated into direct action?
It's the same old Darth Vader system. They have allegiance. See, we say we have allegiance to the light, and we have allegiance to our, gods, and we want to do what's best.
Yeah.
We don't even know the meaning of the word allegiance. Unfortunately, the dark side, they're sworn blind with 100. See, remember, why not? It's their own family dynasties. They literally have no choice in the matter. And don't you see the bromides that they're given? World power, world domination, all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll they can possibly want. These are individuals. Look, the ordinary Joe that is our neighbor will fall for the slightest bribe. We see it every day at our places of work. The kind of duplicity and immorality that people will sell out their fellows for. Right? It's an old story in the human family. Well, think what the incentives are of these individuals, and think of also, like even in a normal terrorist organization like the mafia, what the penalty is for turning your back. Why do you think the Masons have these hierarchical systems? Why do you think the universities have these fraternal...
All right, point taken. It's allegiance.
Allegiance is obedience. And remember, you get an award for that obedience. You get elected. You're one of the inner core.
So the people that are under or aware or under the influence of this Council of Nine, what is their allegiance to?
To the plan. The plan is, of course, manifold. It has four major aspects to it, but that's a whole subject in itself. But they basically want to vacate this planet, Rob.
What are the four pillars of the plan?
That takes too long to go into, but the most important one to realize right now
hold on, because I'm fascinated by this. Just can you describe generally what are some of the characteristics of these four principles of the plan?
The most important one is that they move society forward to get back their technological hardware.
Okay, well that's something we've been discussing.
As anyone even watches a Western, they'll know that when a gunman has his gun removed from him, he feels naked.
Yeah.
You can have all the intelligence up there in the brain, but if you don't have the big stick, then you feel really naked. It's like a samurai without a sword. So that's how these guys felt after the loss of a lot of their hardware. Now, not all of it was destroyed, but enough of it was destroyed where it was to cause them severe panic. These are people, remember, that we're talking about, who had the luxury of flying through space.
Yes.
So you can imagine that the loss of this hardware, and of course we keep on digging it up, and everyone goes, "Oh my goodness, what is this?"
Well, we've already had these crashes. Why don't they just sort of infiltrate this military-industrial complex and take over some of the projects that are working on these?
They are the industrial military complex.
Well, then they have craft. Then they have alien craft that can go to the stars already.
No, they've tried that. They have 101 different ways of doing this.
Yeah.
And it's a long story. It's in the book. We go into why they have not been able to be successful up until now. In fact,
because there have been statements made by some of the people who work at Skunk Works and Boeing, some of the guys who have been, privy and part of these really top projects. And one guy said, it's on the record, that, we have things that can go to the stars.
Sure.
But you saying that that's not true?
It is true, but there's another whole section to this.
Yeah, of course.
Remember when I was telling you that the Nephilim came here, they were being pursued by members of their own planet?
Oh, they were renegades.
They were renegades, and they were thrown out. In fact, if you study the etymology of the word Nephilim, this is what it means. But they were being pursued to our planet by a particular contingent of their own planet. Now, we don't actually know if the people pursuing them were any more good than they were.
Okay.
We don't know that.
We don't know, but
it's a blank entry.
But maybe they were rogue entities of another
the
alien
Nephilim
race.
were rogue, but we don't know that the pursuers, the ones who were throwing them out, were any better. So we have to leave that aside for now.
Okay. So these guys, it's one of their goals is to go back somewhere, is to go back to
certainly to get out of here.
A spacefaring.
Didn't come here by choice.
Okay. No, that's understandable. What other sort of characteristics of this plan can you tell us?
That's the most important thing to realize, which connects to this whole thing about their agenda, is that when they were pursued to this planet, they took refuge on this planet. But before the pursuers left, to go back, they shielded this planet in an etheric barrier. Okay, now get this. The Earth itself is surrounded, and you're not going to be told this in official science books.
I wouldn't have thought so.
No, but around this planet is what they call a quarantine membrane, or a stargate. It's where the original idea of the stargate comes from. There isn't, in fact, and if you study the mythologies, the imagery is there. And the ancients used to know it as an encircling dragon. Okay, the Chinese astrologers used to call it the head and the tail of the dragon. It's the ethereal barrier of energy, highly sophisticated, but also partly connected to the DNA.
It's kind of like transcendental technology.
Yes, and it's a mystery to it.
Yes.
That is why the Nephilim have never been able to get off of here before now. And even one of the four that you're talking about, those four policies.
Yes.
One of the problems that they are facing, and this was discovered in the Tudor times, is that even if they were to build all the technology, including the spacecraft,
right,
and as you say, by now they've already managed that, they still may not be able to get off. So that's what all these spacecraft crashes are all about, and all these sightings of weird flares up in the sky that everyone from Mexico and Australia is seeing every day.
Yeah, they're like the different attempts.
Technology is about.
Yeah, they're like the different attempts that are happening.
Yes,
it's kind of Michael. It's kind of commensurate to the Van Allen radiation belt, something that kept us from the early space program out from exploring the outer reaches of space, simply because this Van Allen radiation belt is very big. It takes a long time to get through, and it's in fact deadly. Well, stay tuned. More to come. Well, we're talking with Michael Tsarion, and Michael, we were just in a place that was extremely interesting. Yeah, we were talking about the radiation that surrounds the Earth and how that is similar to this esoteric sort of boundary, stargate that's around the planet Earth. What source of information do you point to that you discovered this?
This is also in the ancient records. Remember I was telling you about all the different sequestered books and so on?
Yeah.
And also I have been a student of occultism and magic. As I told you, I come from that line. I don't come from the business line or the art world or whatever, any other type of line. For generations back in my family on my mother's side.
Why was there such a focus on this in your childhood? Did you have any people that were of a kind of a high religious status or
very high?
The Brahmins?
Higher than that. My
Sufi?
family is from the Sikh.
They're Sikhs?
Yeah, and we come from, the priest class within the Sikh tradition.
Okay, see, that answers the question. I was asking for something, when you say metaphysical, it's just too broad of a thing. We want to find out where you're coming from.
But even in the Celtic tradition, too, strangely enough, not that my father was aware of any of this, of course, on the Irish side, but even from the ancient legends of the Celts, there's information regarding this etheric barrier and the idea that, and how it pertains to the Nephilim, is that beings from outside our planet can certainly come through it and visit our planet.
Okay.
But beings who have the DNA of the Nephilim cannot leave, and that includes us, the humans. And that's why nobody has gone beyond the moon. You can go to the moon, but you can't go beyond it.
Huh.
And so they're desperate to get out. And so they invented HAARP and these microwave technologies in order to try and break a way through it, through these radiation belts that you're talking about, and they made a complete mess of it. Well,
we've gotten ships past the moon.
Yes, but not with humans in it.
Oh, that's the caveat.
That's why the caveat, and this is the big problem. in the inner circles of the groups that we're talking about, and that's why they're desperate to find a way. They've even gone to the length of privatizing the space program so that any Johnny who has the brains can tell them how to do it, because this is the key to... By the way, if they could have got out of here, we wouldn't be around to be talking about it. One of the 4 things that you were talking about is that if they, in fact, do find the way tomorrow to get out of here...
Yeah, what happens to us?
Oh, we're in really serious trouble.
Why? What would they do to us?
Well, they'll probably incinerate us with these hard technologies that they have. That's why they're developing them. Nick Bajik, remember as I told you, I work with a lot of other disinformation...
Bajik, yes.
...areas of glitch. One of the glitches is in the HARP community, what can never be understood. And
Well, hold on, Mike, hold on. Nick Bajik wrote the book about Angels Don't Play This HARP.
Right.
This massive antenna array up in Alaska.
Right.
That can change the weather and who knows God what else. It can heat
There's no reason why that was created.
It can heat. Hold on, excuse me. It can heat upper layers of the atmosphere.
Got it.
And people, I mean, it's Tesla technology, but they can use it for over-the-horizon radar and all sorts of things. But you're right, it does have other ominous applications.
Well, tell me what Nick Bajik, I've interviewed him, we've talked, we've exchanged books.
Yeah.
Cannot explain, nor can any of them explain, why it is at least 1,000,000 times more powerful than it was said on paper it needed to be.
Yeah, I know. It's just a monster.
Right, and I've told them why, and of course they don't buy into it, but that's fine. Everyone has their own, way of looking at it.
Yeah, by the way, people wanted more information. Just check out HARP, HAARP.
Right.
And it's, you talk about things that are conspiracies. There's one right there that's way out in the open. If that doesn't get your mind spinning, nothing will, because this is all documented. I mean, this HARP project there's nothing made up about it, and the stuff about it is just more strange than any fiction could ever be.
Isn't it incredible? It's more stranger than fiction. And in my book, I have a whole chapter dedicated to the real purposes of HARP and the real purposes of any type of space missions, Apollo missions.
Okay, so you're saying that might be one of the things that they use to bugger us up after they leave?
Well, you see, that could be one of the... I mean, again, it's theory. It's one of the 4 policies that they have. Because remember, they all don't agree within themselves about what they're going to do. They also have debates. They also have different approaches. These individuals have their own coterie who agree and disagree just like any dynasty does. And they have factional differences and so on. But either way, we need to be knowing about what's going on now. Tomorrow, as I say, they are looking desperately. That's why they're into nanotechnology. That's why they're into virtual reality, cloning. They're into all of these different things, not so you, me, and our grandmothers can have better internet, better TV. No. They're into this because they want to get out of this planet. They didn't come here by choice. They didn't expect to be interned here so long.
No.
They didn't expect the pole shift.
They were fleeing.
To delay the end game. But these people live a long time, and their descendants are not from this planet. Why do you think they're raping and murdering and cutting down forests, emptying the oceans, incinerating the place, polluting everything?
Yeah.
They don't belong here. This is one of the biggest testaments of where these people come from, these beings, and the fact that they have the high alien DNA, is that the very treatment of the planet. If that hasn't told anybody that something is seriously wrong, that individuals who've been on this planet for millions and millions of years, that our forefathers must have been, would never, ever treat the planet this way, that there must be something else going on. I don't know what to tell you.
Well,
just take these things for granted as if it's like nothing.
Yeah, it's about greed and fossil fuel and all sorts
of... It is, but it's also about the fact that they're not from here, they don't like it here, the ultraviolet waves are not the same, the Hartmann frequencies of the Earth are not pertaining to them. They feel as bad on this Earth as we would feel like sitting in a sewer and having our dinner.
Oh, dear.
They don't like the spiritual energy of this planet. They never have, and therefore they want to, destroy it. In the book, I go into also this whole idea about the attack on the world and the policy of genocide, the idea that they wanted to suppress female kind because they knew that women contained the mysteries of the planet Earth before they came here. They wanted to wipe out the shamans and the Gnostics and the oracles because these people know how to keep the Earth clean. You see, these are individuals who had a custodianship over the Earth, like the Druids. That's why Charlemagne and all of these kings of Rome massacred the Druids, killed the shamans. That's why the British royal family, through the Hudson Bay Corporation and the East India Company and the Russell Trust, massacred the Native American Indians over here in America. They do it for a reason, not just to get the Indians, but to get the shamans within the Indian groups, these sacred people who knew how to counterbalance their evil. That's why they went to the Aboriginals and the Maoris and the Africans. The true occult history of these countries and these nations has never been told.
They are quite malevolent.
Why? What is the real purpose of this genocide? It's not just to get land and there's ritual reasons involved here. Because
well then, how is it then that the people that are on Earth, say the people that are in high levels of government and power, you say that they owe their allegiance to this group, but why would they when their allegiance to this plan ultimately ends up in their own demise? They're not taking them with them.
No, do you think that they're told that? Of course, you pull a ladder up, right? When you know the gig is done, you pull the ladder up and you leave everybody else down there. But you're not going to tell everybody that. And by the way,
no, the trick, from
the lower levels in the echelon
doesn't work as well.
They're the easiest people to what do you think people will do when you artificially suppress them for millennia? Look at the people in Eastern Germany or in Russia. You keep a country or you keep a set of countries, right, undernourished and impoverished in a third world status for 50 years. Then you open the floodgates. Do you think that person's going to be sitting there with moral questions on their mind? Of course not. They're going to grab whatever they damn well want. Well, it's the same thing with this world. They have had a policy of suppression, both biologically, physiologically, sexually, materially, on the human race and some of their lackeys. They don't give you an option. See, these individuals are master chess players. They don't give you an option.
Yeah.
It's either you're for them or you're against us. They're literally going to tell you how the dialectic works.
So it's funny to think that these willing participants in these secret societies, all down through the ages, whether they wear the robes of priests or of royalty or the suits of business people, are all being duped by this very clever sort of visiting alien species that has been covertly working behind the scenes for thousands of years.
It's exactly the same way we're duped when we go and sit for 18 fluorescent lights in a school.
Didn't Shakespeare write a play about this? No. There is a certain kind of ballet to all this, isn't there? I mean, it's
good point.
There really is. There's kind of, if you look at all this stuff, is this the way it was meant to be, or has our destiny, has our heritage and our the providence of man been sidetracked, derailed?
I think what you brought up is very important, but let me make this caveat. It's very important to bring this out. When we are talking about, say, Freemasons and using that word, I do not, for a start, I'm not talking about your average Freemason who's a well-meaning individual who joins these organizations from the ground level as a speculative or accepted Mason, who's coming in there because he wants to do good for his community and he wants to promote himself and he wants to get up in life. I'm not talking about those kinds of Masons. So
they do great stuff.
Even I'm talking about the Vatican, I'm not talking about Roman Catholicism.
Yeah.
When I'm speaking about the Masons, I'm talking about the bloodline Masons of the Scottish Rite degrees, the 33rd degree and above, who never have been anything but Mason. Their families have been Mason before them. These are the creators of the Masonic lodges that everybody else is allowed to join on much, much lower degrees. So that also needs to be understood. Now, the second point is this. For people who are well-meaning members of these secret fraternities and who don't know anything about these esoteric or more higher magical agendas, just listen to this. Here's a quote, right, from 1700s from the Duke of Brunswick. He was the Grand Master of World Freemasonry, and he stood up, Rob, in France in the 17th century and asked for the worldwide, right, disbandment of Masonry because he knew, like George Washington and many other top Masons understood, that in the 1700s their order had been infiltrated by the Illuminati. Now, the reason why Masonry, anybody who's listening who is a Mason and who wants to learn about the real origins of their own organization, it comes from Egypt many thousands of years ago. But in the 1700s, something very important happened to this secret society. It was infiltrated by a group known as the Illuminati. And it was done in France. The Duke of Orleans, who's probably one of the most negative, you were asking earlier about names on names, well, the Duke d'Orléans, right? The Duke d'Orléans in France, who was the head of what we called Grand Orient Freemasonry, sold Freemasonry out and allowed the Illuminati henchmen to infiltrate the Masonic order and then bring in their agenda. Now, here's the quote from the Duke of Brunswick. He stands up and he says, "I have been convinced that we as an order have come under the power of some very evil occult order, profoundly versed in science, both occult and otherwise, though not infallible. Their methods are black magic, that is to say, electromagnetic power." Now note that.
Wow.
Yes, very interesting. Electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion. We are convinced that the order is being controlled by some sun order after the nature of the Illuminati, if not by that order itself. Now, in my book, I have many quotes from him and other top Masons talking about this thing that a lot of Masons today don't understand. That, because a lot of people will scream and shout about Freemasonry as if it's a negative institution. These individuals, their existence is no secret, but what they do in the lodge is secret. Now, what we have to understand is that there's a history to these things. These organizations once were keepers of the mysteries. They were keepers of the good of humanity. They were great archivists. They built temples all over the world, etc., 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 right? They were infiltrated. We're not talking about the same kind of Freemasonry, before 1700s as we are about afterwards. And some of the earliest books that actually reveal the occult agenda of the Illuminati, like John Robinson's Proofs of a Conspiracy from 1798, That's what they're talking about, how these members of the Illuminati were trying to recruit them and so on. And the Duke d'Orléans, we know he was a major funder and believer in the American Revolution, right? Benjamin Franklin and some of the American men were big friends of this Duke d'Orléans, who also instigated the Reign of Terror in France.
All right, okay.
So we have to know how you were talking earlier about what's the link. How do these political organizations on the paper today, and in front of us today, how do they have these ties to these occult orders? Well,
yeah.
There are many interesting facets about that, and I go into that.
Well, let me just stay here for the record that when this chap was talking about the Illuminati in France, the Illuminati was from Germany, wasn't it?
Well, you see, again, yes. Remember I told you earlier about don't fall for the fact that where they happen to appear in the world is just their actual birthplace. But yes, technically speaking, they were in Bavaria, Germany, and they also appeared publicly, at least for the history books level, in 1776. On May 1st, Adam Weishaupt, on May 1st, 1776, officially founded the Illuminati, and that's why you see that symbol on the dollar bill with the date of 1776. But the Illuminati have been around for many, many thousands of years. They just infiltrated Freemasonry and became more popular.
Now, what about the statement that has to do with electromagnetism?
Isn't that interesting? That's why I read that too, because I think that here's a man who's done what we seem to never be able to do. When people hear us talking about conspiracies or things like occultism, they think we're talking woo-woo. What they don't understand is that in the technical language, in the language of those who are in the know, when you're talking about occultism, you are very much talking about technology, science, silicon revolutions, computers, and mind control. Okay, people have to connect these dots. That what you're seeing when you look at occultism or black magic, it's not just some crazy stuff with some guy with a pointed headdress, who's running around turning frogs into princesses. It's understood that occultism, magic, is very much related, if not the same thing, as technology. So the technocracies of the world, we've seen in our world through the pages of history, that suddenly you turn a page and there's, from the Renaissance onwards, a tremendous push to the advancement technologically, scientifically. Millions of people are starving. Whole cultures are put to the sword. Animals in the earth are brutalized, but no, we have to run forward and wonder about, silicon chips and so on. Why? What's the purpose? Where does the technology come from and what's its agenda?
Yeah.
Telling you what their agenda is if you look at the symbolism that they use on these corporations.
Yeah. It's funny to think that all this mayhem and all this destruction is account of a small group of ETs who are simply displeased with this planet.
These are not just your regular ETs that you happen to see, in some English farm, that happen to come down, to do some reconnaissance. These are a very powerful group that the ancient scriptures talk about, who knew that they were doing a forbidden thing. If you read the book of Enoch, their leader even tells you that he's doing a forbidden thing. And the scholars think, that just had to do with the physical mating with the women. No, it didn't. The mating didn't work. If you read the ancient books from the Middle East, they'll tell you that they did first try regular mating, right? Regular sexual interaction with the earth females.
Okay.
And they say that did not work. There's books that actually tell you that it just completely was like something out of Rosemary's Baby. It totally went awry.
Dear.
That's when they got the idea then to go one step further and do the unthinkable, which is to blend their own DNA with human DNA. That's like prime directive number 1, you never do. And they knew they were doing a forbidden thing.
Wow.
Yeah, the leader, Samyaza, the leader of these angels, literally tells his tells his group, I know that you will not probably want us to do this forbidden thing, and I know that I will have to bear the great sin.
Yeah. Well, so they went against the universal laws.
Yes.
So they
the progeny of that law. Heart dysfunctions, or injustices, or...
Yeah. Well, who do we have on our side? Who enforces the laws of the universe? Karma?
That goes into a whole other level of to do with metaphysics.
Well, I know.
That's a very, very important question.
Yes.
In the book, I try to leave that out because I don't want the full story of this to be contaminated by that. But I do have a section.
Well, it's important to wonder. I mean, who do we have on our side working for us? Who's helping us protect us against this mob?
It is not Flash Gordon, and it's not Christians. It's not Christ, and it's not Krishnas, and it's no external agency. The human race and its own intelligence and its original umbilical connection to the earth is the answer. In the book I go into this. In the very last chapter, I have the final chapter of the book, chapter 22, is called Time to Change the Road You're On, after the Led Zeppelin song.
Yeah.
And in that last chapter, I go into solutions, and basically there are many important solutions, because remember, as Adolf Hitler said, one thing I do agree with Adolf Hitler, what he said, is that he has a quote where he says that you cannot... The exact quote is, he says, there is no such thing as treason against the treasonous. The individuals who have done this to us are the most treasonous individuals on the face of the earth. So we can't commit a sin by using our own intelligence to go against them. There are means to do this. They know the means, so they've taken them away from us. From the Tudor dynasty times, they've tried to make sure that we will not find out where our power is and how to get back to the answers to solve the problem. Because remember, these aliens that pursued them here, who put that etheric barrier there?
Yes.
By putting that barrier there, they actually did something metaphysical. I don't know if they knew it or not, but what they did by creating this quarantine and chaining these beasts to the pit, like it says in the book of Revelation, they made it an earth problem. Yes, they quarantined us because they didn't want these beings to vacate and take their evil elsewhere.
Yeah.
And doing that, they also made it a karmic problem, as you say, for us on the earth. This is a game of chess we now have to play, and we have to master it.
Huh.
There are secrets, Rob. The secrets are connected in Taoism, in Zen, martial artists. There's a specific answer to this. Now, let me just give you a little tantalizing solution scenario. What happens, picture in your mind that the earth is like a cell, a living organism or a body. What happens when a pathogenic entity comes into that body? What do we call that? We call it a virus, right? Where it infects a particular cell.
Okay.
Well, think of the earth like that got infected by this pathogenic force from outside.
Okay.
Well, okay, now we need to know, we do the diagnosis and we find out we've been affected by a virus. Then we go to the remedy solution area.
Yeah.
What are the two main approaches? There's the allopathic system that most doctors will tell you, it's the slash, burn, cut idea, right? Which is, we've been trying.
Right, that's not...
We've been trying. Waving placards in the street.
Yeah, no.
Telling people, look, we got to oust these people. We've got to create new governments over here. So we've tried all those slash, burn.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
What I call the allopathic system.
Okay, or we could form antibodies.
Right. On the other side, you have what is called the homeopathic treatment remedy, which is what? Strengthen the body politic, and that will help. So what we've been doing for centuries upon centuries and centuries, including the first war we had with these guys back 100 years ago, that was the more, what I would call, allopathic system, and it hasn't worked. Basically, they know how that game works, and they're too smart for us, and it won't work.
So it's by strengthening our own spiritual development.
Precisely.
That we defeat these.
Precisely.
Aha.
But the means of how that is done is also a little involved.
Okay.
You've hit the nail right on the head, and the human race needs to know this, because there's two things that you might have noticed even from your other guests. A lot of people in this research community have a lot of big question marks hanging over their work. They don't know this, or they can't explain that, or we don't know how this came about. That's a big problem. There's always bugged me. And two, there's a very, very few people in this world have solutions to the problems.
That's true. Yeah, we want more solutions. Yeah.
I'm saying that because I'm like you. I've listened and I've heard and I've watched.
We want a game plan.
We're familiar with the problem.
Yeah.
Not too many people have a real coherent, one workable system that will create solutions to these mega issues that we're facing.
It's true.
That's what my work is distinguished by, is a particular level of solutions, and the one we've just been talking about is key. And I use that analogy of the infected body politic. There are two ways. We've been trying one, and it hasn't bloody worked.
Yeah, no.
In fact, even the weapons we're using to fight them have been handed to us by them.
Yeah. It's on the inside. We have the ability, just like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. It's inside us. It's just been covered over, and it's been ignored, and it's been suppressed. This own ability to reconcile this problem is alive and well in all of us.
Absolutely right. And we have to reawaken it. Let's not wait for Flash Gordon or King Arthur to come back. Let's realize we are King Arthur. We are the holders of Excalibur.
Yeah.
We are the holders of St. George's Lance.
Michael, that's a very powerful and dangerous concept.
You bet. Why do you think I have so much controversy surrounding me, and also so much interest in do this?
That's what the show.
Field. I'm an outsider I'm an outsider looking in. I came to America. I've been so well received here by members of the paranormal research community. Top figures who've done this their whole life. They talk about my work as like a breath of fresh air to them.
Okay. Well, what are the practical steps that people can do this? Are we talking about meditation? What are we talking about?
It's no one thing for one person.
I know.
Each individual is an individual.
Give us a general approach.
Well, put it this way. Go back to the idea of the body politic. Every white blood cell, every lymphocyte in the body that's trying to heal the disease has its own specific signature. Not all cells do the same thing. Every single cell on Mother Earth, part of her lymphatics. If you imagine, some people still may be not aware that the planet is a living organism. Gaia actually is intelligent. She is living.
Oh yeah.
More of a life than we will ever know.
So what you're saying is that everybody in their own unique way comes to this and makes it happen.
That's right, and that's what ties into the true mystery tradition, the true metaphysical idea that every individual has the temple of God within him and must not fall into a pattern that is, taught or shown by somebody else. What is a human being's uniqueness? We're all out there searching for it.
So how do we strengthen the immune system of Mother Earth?
Right. Man, you're always getting ahead of me. It's incredible. I'm trying not to go into these areas, and you keep pushing me in these areas. These are very, very important principles for the future. All I'll say is this: what you said is the key.
It's no point in talking about it unless we can, get to this point. This is the most important bit.
I know it is.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you because so many other, the people that I've been on with completely don't even.
They don't get the point of it.
Oh, far from it. Again, we are part of the 20th century thinking pattern of the previous millennium was problem think. Granted, okay, great, we got the problems. Now we're in the 21st century. A lot of people don't realize that crossing the millennium here means a huge paradigm shift in consciousness, that we need to be talking about solutions, and solutions involve our connection originally with Mother Earth. Now, why would I say that?
All right.
Before the Nephilim came here, what was going on this planet? Our original hominid fathers, our forefathers, our ancestors, who were incredibly sophisticated. Of course, we don't know because there's none of them left, but we can only imagine that beings who've been on this planet for millions and millions of years are in harmony with not only our planet, but the universe. It's about getting back to that. But there are specific stages of getting back to that. You have people running around the whole world today looking for uniqueness, looking to be original. What the hell does the word original mean? Origins. It has the word origins in it, meaning you have to go back to origins. You have to find your roots. Well, believe it or not, our roots are in the earth. Even if you're a Christian, then the higher force of God created the earth as your perfume garden, as your altar. If you're desecrating the altar that has been given to you, how dare you then imagine that you're going to inherit a kingdom come and heavens beyond? You have to deal with what has been given to you by the force. If you're a pagan, if you're a Wiccan, the same bottom line denominator exists. You're all on your earth. A great scientist once said that I work with, he said that if you project a line down through people's heads to their feet, all feet converge at the center of the earth, but their heads, if you project the line out to space from the head, all heads are more diverse. They're all separated. So the intellect separates people, right? Yeah. But the feet that goes to the ground, all feet converge at a central point in the center of the earth. So you were talking a minute ago about visualization and meditation. Look at that for a meditation idea, that everyone is connected to this earth. Now, except the Nephilim, they dislike it. It's not even their earth. They don't like it. It's like you having to, park your
So the destruction of the
door's closed and you can't get out, and you're stuck with all these reprobates that you don't
I know.
like.
Yeah, it's very unpleasant for them. So what you're saying is the destruction of the ecosystem is a primary goal of this group, because that would weaken our response and our ability to resist this group.
And you can't imagine how weak. They knew from day one, from the times of the Tudor dynasty and before. They knew that is why empire.
That's why we're using fossil fuels. That's why we're.
Why do you think? Yes. Why do you think that empire building
the oceans
almost goes hand in hand with genocide and the destruction of the earth? People just take that for granted as if they all come together. No, they don't. You can have empire quite easily without having to do that. How come those things come in league with it? Because that was the agenda. The idea is to weaken the planet Earth.
Well, Michael, we've got a big problem because we have all these developing countries that are just kicking out pollution left and right. We've got America that's just
kicking. By who? The World Bank and the
I know. So, I mean, that looks like a pretty daunting task to turn the tide of this global pollution process.
It is daunting, but you see, remember the old statement, they say that a single match of light can illuminate an entirely dark room?
I'd rather light a candle than curse your darkness, Michael.
Right, but remember they say that the single...
yes, a single candle will fill a room.
Right, but the same amount of darkness cannot extinguish a room of light. So, yes, never lose faith because,
Yeah. No, I don't.
Part of our karmic cycle. By the way, what's happening on this planet is written in the karmic books. This sequestering, the visitation, the creation of the the Stargate, this is all part of our destiny in this space-time continuum. There's also a spiritual dimension to this, and I know you're trying to get to that. By us incarnating as souls on this planet at this time, we are of the frequency where we need to experience this, not just to find our earthly uniqueness. That's a very important step, especially for the young generation today. Everyone charging around looking for this thing called uniqueness. Well, how can you find your uniqueness if you're not facing point zero, if you're not facing ground zero? The reason why so many people are lost is not only because you have an overt action to keep them dumbed down, that's the first thing, but also because, you see, you're not going to find your inherent uniqueness unless you're facing the right mountain peak. if you're not working towards the right agenda, then of course Mother Nature, that universal intelligence, is hardly going to want to use you, is it? So you have to be facing.
You have to be oriented properly.
In order to know where to drive your car.
Okay.
The right goal is the healing of Mother Earth, which in turn heals us.
So you're saying that's the one thing that can unify all the diverse groups of thought, creed, and race out there. Is that's the one unifying principle that really has strong connections to our faith and our developing spirituality.
It has everything to do with it, because if we don't do it, we're going to inherit what we're seeing right now.
Wow, fascinating stuff.
We're able to break our umbilical connection, partly through the normal process of just splicing their DNA with us.
We couldn't live on a different planet.
DNA, right?
Yeah, I mean, our bodies are very much in need of the specific magnetic signature that the Earth. I mean, you just can't take somebody, put them on a different planet, and expect that they'll be happy.
Well, think it's even worse than that. As Wilhelm Reich and other people, the great scholars, showed, consciousness affects matter. So the dumbing down and our intellectual chaos inside, our schizoid mentality, the fact that we've got alien DNA, our thinking, right? The mass consciousness, what we call the collective consciousness, then in turn affects Mother Nature. So people are looking at tsunamis and all sorts of Earth disasters and saying Earth disasters and the way the Earth matter affects consciousness. Hey, wait a minute. The greatest scholars are saying no, it's the other way around. The unspiritual lower chakra type thinking energy vibration of the human being is actually affecting the Earth itself in a negative way.
So it was a two-pronged approach by this dark hand, that they would physically pollute the Earth and they would pollute the minds of the people, which also in turn pollutes the systems of the Earth.
Fascinating. The great Richard Hoagland, shown that on the 33rd meridian of this Earth, if Freemasons know about the number 33, that's where all the world banks are. That's where most of the nuclear bombs have been detonated.
Well, that's
where the palaces of these dynasties are. There's certain areas on the Earth that they like to live.
Well, 33 has to do with 33 vertebrae in the human spine?
And it has to do with the movement of the sun through the zodiac. These individuals know that when they're going to have a war, what part of the Earth grid to put the war on, so it will have the maximum amount of effect. When they have an assassination over here, they'll make sure that it's at a very important part of the Earth grid, so that the maximum amount of fear and anxiety, like 9/11, people don't realize why the World Trade Center was attacked, why John F. Kennedy was shot in Dallas, or why Lady Diana Spencer was killed in Paris. There's certain reasons that are much to do with sidereal zodiac timing, and also places on the Earth where by watching it on TV or watching it in the newspapers,
it has the most impact.
An enormous release of psychic kinetic energy, emotionally from us, that goes into the Earth grid, that continues the fear, that perpetuates the subliminal manipulation of mankind. You have subliminals coming through the television, through the media. You have fear and mayhem on the news every night. This has an occult agenda, and we are getting our immune system dumbed down. Our immune system, which is a spiritual thing, it's not just a biological thing that some doctor will tell you about. Your immune system is a very important spiritual light body. And once it's suppressed, down, we are disconnected from ourselves, we're disconnected from our own authentic destiny, we're certainly disconnected from other people, and more importantly, we lose our connection with nature. Now,
Michael,
they knew that was going to happen. In a very short time, Rob, they knew that if you do this, remember, because they think our things very, very much in advance, they knew that if you go to this length and cut people off from nature, which they've been connected with for millions of years, they're going to have to need some backup, because they're going to go schizoid within 50
So what do they give us in place of nature?
Christianity.
Oh my goodness. Well, Michael, your book is called Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation. It is truly fascinating. If people want more information, they can simply go to www.taroscopes.com. That's T-A-R-O Scopes. Taroscopes.com. And of course, you also can be reached by mail at P.O. Box 95398, Seattle, Washington, which Washington is abbreviated W.A. Zip code there is 98145. That's P.O. Box 95398, Seattle, Washington.
I have a phone number, too, that you can call to order. It's 206-527. 2968. 206-527-2968.
Of course,
on the website, Rob, it's an Atlantis page. It has my email.
It's got
contact me.
It's got your contact information on the website, and this is so funny because there's just so much more to go into, Michael.
Somebody wants an ebook. They can get it from atlantisbook.com. We have a second website called atlantisbook.com.
Atlantisbook.com.
They can either order the hard copy or they can get an ebook. If they want an ebook for their computer, they can get that from us as well.
Oh, that's pretty handy. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much more to go into, Michael. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but the implications of all of this stuff, how it works, and all the different levels is something that I love to explore. And I'm glad we went through it and spent some time on the end result and all of this. And as I say, it's really important to kind of get to the part where we can find out what's going on and how to work it.
Fix it. Exactly. I'm a big believer in solutions, and I don't see enough of that. And I certainly don't talk to as many hosts like you who really have that as a main thing, because we are in the age of solutions now. The 21st century is the time for solution think, and that's a very, very important thing to understand.
Yep. Michael Tsarion, thank you so much for joining us here in the Headroom.
Great pleasure, Rob. It was great meeting you at the expo over here.
Yep.
And I'm glad we got a chance to share.
Yeah, me too.
Thanks for giving me that time.
Well, there you have it, another Headroom Talk Show submitted for your approval. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We've had an extraordinary ride, and the ramifications of the things that we talked about indeed reflect upon the survival of the human race and of the entire planet. So, just another day's work here in the Headroom.